Thank you, everyone, once again for tuning into the lectures for organizational management. I think last time we were looking at decision making, and this particular series is going to end the conversations around decision making. So today, I just really want to speak around managerial decision making. So it's going to be like a continuation of what I did in previous week, last week specifically, and of course, we also look at some case studies as well. And I think part of the feedback I got from that case study is like managerial decision making is really an exciting subject. It's not something that is pretty much that simple as we would like to imagine that decision making is really simple. But today, I think I just want to recap on what we've done so far relating to decision making. And of course, we're going to cover some aspects that we've not previously looked at. We will look at issues relating to maybe managerial decision making styles, and we'll also look at some other models as well, and we'll also look at other factors that obviously influence managers when making decisions as well. So I think my task today is really simple. I just want to recap. So last time I mentioned that we'll look at managerial decision making. So the question is, what is managerial decision making? And of course, is more like a question mark, as you can obviously see on my screen shaking down, blinking down there on the screen. What is managerial decision making? What does that entail? What is decision making in itself? When we do the exercise last week, I think a number of keywords kind of pop out from each of the groups that are participated in that particular activities. And today we're going to look at what that entails. So we know quite well that obviously when you're looking at decision making, so we established that decision making is the art of choosing one alternative from among a set of alternatives. So you have wide range of alternatives or options, and then of course you're trying to select one. So you have to make decision about that. And managers in an organization are often confronted with making decision at all times in an organization, and it's not that very simple for managers to come up with making the right decision. And of course, what you want to do, you want the situations where you're making the right decisions, because we know that the implication of making the wrong decision, it can have a far-reaching effect on an organization. So we have to choose in a way from wide range of options, but of course we have to first decide that a decision has to be made, and that's the very first step. And then, of course, secondly, we need to identify that set of visible alternatives before we actually select one. I think that's where it gets really complicated when you're looking at, you know that you have to make a decision, and you know that you're confronted with set of complex alternatives or options that is available for you to pick one from. And within organizations, and making that right score is absolutely essential for managers. So, so this slide kind of give an overview of what managerial decision making kind of entails. I think what I've tried to capture, and of course I'm going to explain some of those key terms. So we're going to look at decision maker styles. We'll look at directive, conceptual behavior, and also analytical decision makers styles. We'll also look at other areas relating to decision making approach. For example, I had made mention of the rationalities, bounded rationalities, and intuition. So these are decision-making approach. And in the exercise we did last time, we look at this, and we try to establish some of these factors as well. And of course, I think we one of the things that we also one of the highlights is the decision-making condition. Sometimes you're making decision under certainty, you're making decision under risk, you're making decision under uncertainties as well. And we highlighted the difference between structured and well-structured program. And of course, we also we're going to emphasize, we're going to explain that much more in the later part of this or my discussion today. I believe is going to be something that is going to provide further insight into managerial decision making as well. So I think the basic things, obviously, is that we need to understand the natures of problem that managers are likely to face, and of course that will have different implications for decision makings in organizations. And of course, one of the things that's been highlighted in the literature is around these, and I can refer you to the book of Taft and call it, which is a recommended book for this particular module. We see that obviously when we start to look at maybe structure problem or program decisions. So these are usually made decision that is made at the lower level management teams by managers at lower levels. And of course, the more complicated the problem becomes, then of course it can start to rise to the top level managers in an organization. So unstructured problems or very complex problems are more likely to be handled by top level managers within organizations. These are more likely to be strategic type of problems that can have a big implications on the survival of the organization. These type of problems are usually referred to as not program decisions when making decisions relating to them. I think that's the part that obviously managers and leaders needs to work hard to make sure that they're making the right. And of course, there is no set formulas for making decision in an organization, but it is important that managers get it right. And what are the things that need to be taken into consideration, into account when making that call, when making that decision, is really important for managers to figure that out. And that's why we're doing this now, to stimulate that discussion as well. So, like I mentioned, so when you look at managerial decision making across organizational levels, so we've talked about operational level, which is like junior management. You can look at tactical level, where you're looking at maybe middle managers and strategic. When you're relating to senior management, team, hub, and organizations. So, at operational level, what are the key type of decision that you maybe would like to see there? I think one of the things that you can see there is the day-to-day decision, simple routine issues that you can see in that area. And of course, one of the other things as well you want to also see is that at the middle level, so you try to look at maybe less complex problems at that level that is handled by middle managers, and the idea is can help contribute to the organizational goals. It can managers at that level can help implement some of the key things that obviously that is being required by organizations. So you can pretty much be certain that there's a lot of things that middle managers can contribute in that regard. But when you start to look at obviously strategic level, these are not routine, complex, very long-term decisions that are more likely to be taken at the senior level of an organization. And managers needs to be very, very, very much alert to their functions here, and this is why because of their long-term implications on the survival of an organization. So decision makers needs to get it right. I think that's the point that senior level managers needs to be very well much aware of. So I think that being said, I believe that obviously when you start to look at some of the processes that is involved, or the steps that are involved in managerial decision making, one of the things that obviously you want to start with, remember earlier on I made mention that obviously when you're talking about managerial decision making, there is first of all need to recognize that there is need to make a decision. So there's that need for recognition of decision requirements, and of course once that is established, you can then obviously go to the next stage where you're looking at where you're trying to diagnose, where you're trying to analyze a wide range of issues in terms of the courses, in terms of what are the likely courses that you can draw on, and that can lead to the third stage where you're looking at the development of alternatives. So you're looking at options. You're looking at what else can you choose from. And once you've established that, I believe the next logical steps, obviously, to look at is the selection of desired alternative. So that's when you're actually selecting a desired alternatives from the range of alternatives that is there. So of course, once you do that, you can go on to the next step, which is the implementation of your chosen alternatives or the options that you selected, and you try to look at evaluations and feedback based on that. Does it work? Does it not work? This is a typical process in any managerial decision making that's been captured in the literatures. But of course, sometimes this thing is not done in a way that you can easily point to it. Sometimes it's done like an intuitive method, but there are some processes that have gone past that stage where you're making that particular decision, as the case may be. So let's look at what is coming next as we try to wrap up this. And I believe that obviously a number of you we find this really useful. So we've looked at the steps. So I just want to maybe just to cap it up that this is not the steps in itself is not a one-off exercise. So it's more like a loop, a repetitive processes, if you like, where you've defined the problems, you generate and try to evaluate the alternative solutions. You have to choose your preferred course of actions and conduct possible ethics checks and double check the things that you need, whether this is the right decisions you're trying to probe at this particular stage. You implement your decision as step 4, and of course you try to evaluate your results. Is it what, why, is it not? And you can obviously repeat the process as much as necessary. So it's not a one-off exercise per se. What that means is you want to weigh and evaluate your criteria that is there. So which criteria are more or less important? So you can look at absolute comparison, and you can look at relative comparison. So when you're looking at absolute comparison, so each of the criterions is compared to a standard rank on its own merit. And when you're looking at relative, so you're comparing directly to every other criterion that is available within your options. And some of those may relate to maybe accelerations, maybe efficiency, maybe your handling steering in the case of if you're looking at a car decision, for example, you're looking at ride qualities or braking or transmissions and handling steering if you want to make decision relating to buying a car, for example. So these will be some of the ways that obviously you can weigh the options, you can weigh the criteria that you've got. And this happens in an organization quite a lot that managers are confronted and they're trying to make decisions all the time. It may also be that you also weigh in that with your design criteria, for example, overall outlook, interior, seat accessories, and the like. So there are a wide range of things that obviously managers needs to take into account when you're looking at making decision in an organization. So it may be you are concentrating on profitability, you also looking at costing, you also looking at the overall maybe long-term strategic implication of those decisions for the organization survivors and performance of the organizations as well. So managers need to take into consideration a whole lot of things when making decisions in an organization. And this will lead to the type of areas that I've talked about in terms of the approaches. So you could looking at maybe bounded rationalities where managers try to take a rational approach to decision making. And we know that sometimes these could be constrained when managers are constrained by limited resources, managers are constrained by maybe expertise problem. We don't have the expertise to make that particular decisions. We need to defer to get the right expertise to help us make that call. Sometimes it could be attention problem, memory problems, and this is very much more important in choosing the solution that is required for that particular organization. So the question then is that you want to try, do you want to maximize your decisions or do you want to go by what is called satisficing, where you're choosing the good enough solutions, or you want to you want to select the best solution that is impossible to do? Is it the good enough? Are you going to go by the good enough solutions or the best? solutions for that particular problem. Sometimes this may be a function of wide range of other factors that you need to take into account when making that final call. So, but of course, we know that things like framing is called effect of framing, uncertainty, and common mistakes in decision making. Sometimes the effect of framing on decision making, this could be positive frame. So a positive frame is like a problem presented as gain. It becomes more risk adverse, and of course, we can start to also look at other areas where you're looking at maybe negative frame, for example, where a problem presented as loss become more risk seeking, and so you can also start to look at condition of uncertainties. These are other areas that obviously also impact on managerial decision making. So where you're looking at the condition of uncertainties where the odds or winning or losing are unknown. So when you're looking at maybe the risk propensity is being called in the literatures, I like that terminology, risk propensity, where it's a person tendency to take or avoid a risk. So this is really important for managers in making decisions. So sometimes you find that common decision making mistakes where you over relying on intuitions. There is that availability of bias, and also there's the representative bias that's also prevalent in making that particular decisions within the organization. These are things that can affect decision makings, obviously, when managers are trying to make decisions in an organization. And so what happened is you have that over reliance on intuitions. And what is intuition? Intuition plays that a bigger part in many managerial decision makings. We know that it works best to experienced managers because sometimes it depends on your experience to make the right call. And over reliance can really cause people to become overconfident and careless, and they can be even sometimes become inconsistent. And of course, I talked about the ideas around availability of bias, which is also present there. And we also see that representative bias is also present there. Say, for example, when you're looking at maybe the tendency of the decision maker to give preference to recent information, for example, and specific art and behavior can even sometimes become really, really problematic for managers to make, because they can just draw on what is available, and instead of maybe searching for other alternatives and make effort to search for the right goal. So this can become an issue in the way. So I think we can obviously also look at other issues relating to, maybe because there's no evidence as well, that can be a factor. And we've seen that, but how do you actually overcome that bounded rationalities issues that we've talked about? So we could find the situations where you bringing up different teams that can help to form an expert opinion relating to decision that you're trying to look at. So it could be group decision. So that can help to present a balanced view to the problem that you're trying to solve. So you could bring in people from different aspects of the organization, from operations, from finance, and from HR, for example, and you can have a chairperson that will chair that to help make the right call for that particular organization. And what is we could see that obviously there are advantages and disadvantages associated with some of these things. And we can easily pick them out. And when you start to look at some of the advantages, so you could look at issues relating to maybe improve problem or definitions and increase alternative generation. So because if you involve large number of people, that can increase the pool of alternatives that you can have as an option, and that can even also enrich the quality of the decision itself. So because we are having input from different perspectives, from different people who are actually making an effort to contribute to solve the problem. So that in itself can lead to a robust decision that can help overcome the problem you're trying to solve, as opposed to if it is a single individual that is making that particular decision. So some of those pitfall in group decision making is what is referred to as groupthink, for example, where members try to minimize conflict, and then obviously they also maybe in a way try to reach a consensus without critical evaluation of the alternatives that is present there. So that is also very much a pitfall and take time. It takes time because we know because you're trying to reach consensus from a wide range of opinion, so that can take time. And you may have situations where one or two people dominate the discussion as well. So, and politics can come at plays here as well. So this could be a serious problem for that decision. There could be hidden agendas. So that's another thing to bear in mind. Organization is made up of people, and people are by nature political. So there could be hidden agendas inherent in some of those suggestions that may be coming forward. So a group think, for example, a barrier can become a barrier to good decision making, caused by pressures within a group for members to agree with each others. So usually I've tried to explain how these work because there is time pressures, there is lack of interest. Sometimes group members are similar in background, so a lack of commitment to make difficult decisions can actually present there. So these could be something that obviously managers needs to be very much alert to within the organization itself. So managers needs to be alert to this. Sometimes it's necessary for you to have someone to place the devil's advocate that is generating a potential solutions. You try to assign that devil's advocate to criticize and question the solutions. This could be maybe an external consultant, for example, look at that has to provide that extra critique to the solutions that is being generated. And of course, you can try to decide whether to use or change the proposed solution based on some of the things that are coming forward from the devil's advocate. So from someone who is actually critiquing and looking at what has been said and how the organizations can possibly look at the implications of those decisions in a way that maybe the managers themselves are not actually looking at those decisions themselves. But we're going to look at the case studies in as synchronous activities, and of course we can to look at those cases and or try as much as possible to use that to explore what we've looked at around managerial decision making. So there may be questions to improve your decision making and judgment. And one of those questions, sometimes you can pick these up. I would recommend to get a copy of this slide and sometimes just pick them up. There are a wide range of areas where you can improve your judgment. There are areas obviously where you can identify and limit your decision makings and bias and errors. And sometimes even things like groupthink, for example, questions relating to maybe have we considered dissenting opinions that can help to overcome that to resolve that issues. And it may also be a case of where you are actively soliciting dissenting view, opposing view, and if necessary, so you deliberately soliciting that, especially relating to group decision making, you can use that method to overcome the issue of groupthink, for example. And of course, you can also look at issues relating to when you're looking at maybe affective, maybe heuristic, for example, where you're looking at questions relating to, oh, have we actually fallen in love with the idea? And of course, you need to double check that. You need to make sure that you not you overcoming that by questioning, you overcoming that by asking the right set of questions. And you want to check maybe issues around confirmation bias, for example, have we considered credible alternatives? You want to request additional options. In that case, if you haven't, you may want to request additional options. And this obviously relates to other areas as well in decision makings where you're looking at these points and the other point you want to overcome them. Maybe, for example, maybe overconfidence or optimism bias, for example. These could be questions like, is the base case overly optimistic? So you want to obviously take a very skeptical views as well to look at that and see how what would be the possible implication of that particular method for your organization. So decision making styles, I think I mentioned that, of course, that you looking at situations where sometimes you know that leaders and managers needs to make that decisions, they needs to make that call, but of course, because you have different decision making styles, so you could have autocratic, you could have what is called considered command, for example, where leaders almost decide, get reactions, and then of course makes a final decisions. And of course, you can see the consultative, where obviously, as the name suggests, where leaders solicit ideas and then make decisions. It could be veto power, it could be majority, it could be consensus or delegation, for example, where leaders actually delegate the decision to individuals to decide and set clear parameters around that as well. So that can help managers to start to make those type of calls within the organization. So for me, I think the difference between among people with respect to how they perceive problem and make decisions is what you usually refer to as the decision styles. But not all managers make decisions the same way. That's needed to be told. So we know that there could be directive, analytical, conceptual, or behavioral styles. So that needs to be taken into account. We all don't make decisions the same way. Well, of course, when you start to look at the decision-making approach, we see the rational, we see the behavioral, practical, and personal approach. Because, like I said, managers make decisions differently, and so that has implications for decision-making within organization. When you're looking at personal decision making frameworks and the directive styles, so the key things with the directives is that people would prefer maybe simple, clear-cut solutions to problems, and you have to make decisions quickly in that regard. And this sometimes is very efficient and very rational, and sometimes we prefer rules of the games. But sometimes when you're looking at maybe a situation that is very maybe programmed and classical administrative political decision types, so some of these personal decision making styles can come into play. And the final part will be that you're looking at that best options for solving that particular problem. So when you're looking at analytical styles, I think one of the key things with analytical decision making is that it's based on as much data as you can gather. So you gather data, so you try to analyze this. You're trying to not to make decisions based on just mere intuitions. You're trying to make decisions based on data. But when you're looking at conceptual style, you're considering a broad amount of information. So you're looking at socially oriented rather than analytical styles. You like to talk to other people about the problems and potential and solutions to that particular problems. So of course, with the analytical styles, obviously once you gather information, you analyze those data so that come into you, that will present you with right range of options to choose from, and you can search for the best possible alternatives, the best possible outcome for the organization itself. And the final part, obviously, we start to look at behavioral, where you're looking at, well, you have a deep concern for others as individuals. So you like to talk to people one on one before making that call, and you understand their feelings about the problem and the effects. Of course, in the last case of this, where we look at the situations where the organizations was in the dilemma of trying to reduce costs at the same time trying not to harm employees by letting them go. So this was a classical example where behavioral decision making styles we come into play. And of course you see other issues relating to maybe the personal issues where the managers and leaders within the organizations are much more concerned with the personal development of others, and that was evident in that particular case where we looked at last week. But you want to make decisions to help others achieve their goals. This is really some of the things that are bottom of decision making using behavioral styles. So I think at a glance, this is more like kind of sum it up when you're looking at directives. So these are tasks and technical concerns. These are people and social. So these conceptuals and behavior tends to be people and social concerns in terms of value or retentions. But when you're looking at the tolerance for ambiguities, where it's very low here and it's very high here. So when situations the ambiguity is very high, you're looking at analytical, maybe much more useful way to make that core. You need enough information. You need to gather the data. You need to analyze those data before you arrive at decisions from among the numerous alternatives that you've come up with. And this is really important in terms of that as well. So new decision making approach for turbulent times. So one of the things that have been used during turbulent period, during crisis period, is that you could use brainstorming, you could practice the five whys, you could we want to know when to pay, you want to lend, you don't want to punish, you want to avoid group things, engage in rigorous debate as well. So this would be very critical for managers during a turbulent period where you're brainstorming, you calling people, you asking you the why, what we making this, is this the right decisions? Are we on the right track? What will be the result of this? What is the possible implications? What implication is this going to have on our organizations? You just probing, you questioning, you brainstorming, you engage in a rigorous debate, you learning from what has happened, you're making sense of that. So these are really critical when you're making a decision during a turbulent period. For poor decision making, obviously, we know the implication of that. I'm not going to draw so much in that. Sometimes it's really influence of maybe initial impression, seeing what you want to see. Sometimes you that's the buyer for the status quo. Sometimes it could be a place and problem framing as well. Could be a bigger issues in that particular regard as well. So these are sometimes very, very serious stuff that managers needs to deal with to be able to overcome poor decision makings in an organization. Because, like as I've mentioned, poor decisions could affect an organization. It could have a dramatic impact on the direction of an organization, especially with the strategic problems that the managers are making decisions relating to. If a poor decision is made at the top level, this can have a bigger implication on the organization business continuity and survival. Even the performance of the organization can be affected in the interim. So it is really important that managers try as much as possible to avoid making poor decisions in organizations. I think these steps kind of sum them up in terms of when you're looking at decision making, the values of decision making in organization management. So we know it can help in terms of maybe better utilization of resources. It can help us to utilize the resources much more in a much more efficient and much more effective ways, instead of going into waste, instead of using resources that is not necessarily needed. So if you make the right decision, that can easily avoid that. And obviously, the dynamic capabilities of the organization can be enriched, because if you have the right set of people, the right quality of people in an organization, that can help us to overcome some of those things easily within the organization itself. So I believe those are some of the cores that managers need to easily deal with. And of course, we know that business growth, for example, I talked about that already, efficiency, innovations, and it can motivate employees to do the right thing, the right sort of thing. People want to genuinely do their jobs. So of course, it's really important to ensure that the right sort of decision is made within the organization, so that they can easily get motivated and easily continue to do their job. I believe this would be way much more better than managers making the wrong decisions within the organization itself. So that would be my gut feelings here, and the researchers pointed out. So I will also recommend you that you can go back to the lectures by the draft in the books on managerial decision making, in the recommended texts that can give us an insight into what we need to do here. So, ethical decision making. This is just about wrapping it up. I think within this space of time. But sometimes I think it's really important that managers makes ethical decision making. Uh, of course, we know that you want to ensure that you're making a decision that is not having an impact, having major impact on the organization. Sometimes the idea of the ethical persuasions, where you want try to be truthful, authentic, you want to have respect for others and equities and social responsibilities as well. We talked about corporate social responsibility in our previous lectures, so I'm not going to cover that here. But I think the key things with the ethical decision making is that you're trying to look at the well-being of the science, you're trying to look at the well-being of the environment, right? You're looking at the so-called bottom three, triple three line where you're looking at people, profit, and planet, right? Taking those into considerations when making decisions in your organization. So, and of course, we know that ethical companies obviously, with research points to suggesting that ethical companies are much more beneficial for organizations in terms of improving their reputations and trust in societies, with consumers and stakeholders as well. So these are really important stuff that managers needs to ensure that they're making the right call, they're making the right decision that is not having a detrimental impact on people's planet and even their own shareholders and stakeholders of the organizations as well. So that being said, I think we're getting very close, exciting to the end of this now. I think the final things I want to mention is that in week 15, that's when we're looking at supply and production planning. But of course, it's also the right time now for me to say you need to make decision on your assignment because you need to finish it and submit it on time. And of course, that is something that a number of you have been saying. Maybe perhaps you struggling with, but I think it is really important for you to know what you do at this particular stage and see what you can do to solve that particular problem. But of course, the guidance and the recommended guidance that is there can help you to make that call and make that right decisions that as the case may be. So thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, I think in week 15, when we're looking at supply and production planning, that will be something that I will urge you to turn in. And of course, I created with YouTube channels as well that you can get additional materials and insight relating to some of the things that obviously I'm not able to cover here. Of course, I can just post that extra additional resources just to support you. So thank you so much. And I believe I will see you again over the course of the week, and good luck with your assessment submission as well. So thank you all.